At dawn, the Appalachians held their breath. 16 years she'd lived under his rule. Now, with his grip finally loosened, she moved with a precision and fury the valley wasn't ready to witness. The mountains knew her name before she did. They called her Celia in the big house, a name given by people who had no right to name anything. But in the hours before dawn, when she walked the ridge lines gathering herbs, the wind whispered something different, something that sounded like freedom, though she couldn't yet make out the words. The Ashford plantation sat in a valley where the Tennessee mountains rolled down into North Carolina, a place where the earth itself seemed to hold secrets. It wasn't like the sprawling cotton empires of the Deep South. Here, tobacco grew in patches between the rocks, and the enslaved population numbered only 15 souls, small enough that Master Thomas Ashford could know each face, each scar, each act of defiance, small enough that he knew Celia especially well. She was 23 years old that autumn, born on this land to a mother who died bringing her into the world. Old Esther, who tended the sick, said her mother had been from somewhere else, somewhere far, that she'd carried the knowledge of roots and stars and had passed something of it into Celia's blood before she left this world. Celia had her mother's hands, Esther said, healing hands. But that morning, as she descended from the ridge with her basket full of golden seal and wild ginger, Celia's hands were thinking about different work entirely. The sun broke over the eastern peaks, painting the valley in shades of copper and rust. Smoke rose from the big house chimney. Bess would be starting breakfast. From the quarters, she could hear the morning sounds, children crying, men coughing, the clatter of tin cups and wooden bowls. Another day, beginning like all the others, except it wasn't. "You're late," Bess said, when Celia entered the kitchen house. Bess was 50 if she was a day, her hair gone completely gray, her back bent from decades of standing over hot stoves. But her eyes were sharp, and they saw everything. "He asking for you," Celia's stomach tightened, but she kept her face smooth as riverstone. "What he want? What he always want?" Bess turned back to her cooking, her voice flat. "Says his shoulder paining him, wants you to bring your herbs and tend to it." They both knew Master Ashford's shoulder was fine. He was 37 years old, broad-shouldered and healthy, a widower these past 2 years since his wife died of fever. His real pain was loneliness and the particular cruelty that grew from having absolute power over other human beings. "I'll see to it," Celia said quietly. "Chile." Bess's voice stopped her at the door. When Celia turned, the older woman's face had softened into something like sorrow. "You be careful. I seen that look in your eyes lately. That look gets folks killed." "What look?" "The one that says you'd rather die than live like this one more day." Celia met her gaze. "Maybe dying ain't the worst thing could happen to a person." "Yes, it is," Bess said firmly. "Long as you're breathing, you got a chance. You got a chance to see things change, but you got to be alive for it." Celia wanted to ask, what chance, what change? But she'd already learned that hope was a luxury and questions were dangerous. So she just nodded and walked across the yard toward the big house. The morning was crisp, the first real cold of autumn. In another few weeks, they'd be harvesting the last of the tobacco, and then would come the hardest season, winter, when there was no escape from the close quarters, the cold, the master's attention. She climbed the back steps and entered through the kitchen door, moving through the house with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned to take up no space. The hallways smelled of beeswax and tobacco smoke. Master Ashford's study door stood open. He sat at his desk, account books spread before him, a glass of whiskey already at his elbow, though it wasn't yet 8 in the morning. He looked up when she entered, and something moved behind his eyes, something she'd learned to recognize and dread. Celia. Finally. He leaned back in his chair. Close the door. She did, her heart hammering against her ribs. Come here. She crossed the room, her basket of herbs clutched in front of her, like a shield. She'd prepared a poultice of arnica and comfrey, the kind that might legitimately help with pain. Maybe if she attended to his shoulder quickly, professionally, he would let her leave. But when she reached his side, his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "You've been avoiding me," he said softly. 3 days now, you've found excuses not to come when I've called. Do you think I don't notice? No, sir. I've been tending to the sickness. Little Thomas had the croup, and Mary's baby. I don't care about Mary's baby. His grip tightened. I care about you understanding your place here. You belong to me, Celia. Every part of you. Do you understand? She understood. She understood that he could do anything he wanted to her, and the law would call it property management. She understood that her body was not her own, that her future was not her own, that even her thoughts had to be guarded because too much intelligence, too much awareness in her eyes might provoke him. But understanding and accepting were different things. "Yes, sir," she whispered. He studied her face, and she forced herself to look down, to play the role he expected. After a long moment, he released her wrist. "Good. Now about my shoulder." She prepared the poultice with trembling hands, her mind far away, up in the mountains where the wind blew free. She thought about the paths she knew up there, the caves where a person could hide, the ridges that led north toward Kentucky and Ohio, and the word that lived in every enslaved person's dreams: freedom. She'd been thinking about it more and more lately, not just the vague fantasy that sustained them all, but actual planning. She knew the mountains better than anyone on the plantation. Better, she suspected, than Master Ashford himself, who rarely ventured beyond his valley. She could identify every plant, every landmark. She could move silent as smoke through the forest. And she'd been listening. When traders came through, when visitors from other plantations arrived, she listened to their talk of the railroad. That wasn't a railroad at all, but a network of people who helped the enslaved reach freedom. She'd heard whispers of stations and conductors and the North Star that led the way. "You're quiet today," Master Ashford said, jolting her back to the present. His shirt was open, and she was applying the poultice to his shoulder with careful, impersonal touches. "What's going on in that head of yours?" "Nothing, sir. Just concentrating on my work." He caught her hand again, holding it against his bare chest. "You know, Celia, things could be easier for you, a woman in your position, with your looks. You could live in the house, have your own room, better food, better clothes. My wife's things are just sitting upstairs gathering dust. You could—" "I need to check on little Thomas," she interrupted, pulling her hand away with more force than was wise. "He was real sick last night, and if I don't— Did I say you could leave?" The air in the room changed. She'd made a mistake, shown too much resistance, too much of her true self. His face hardened, and he stood up slowly. "I've been patient with you," he said, his voice dropping into a register that made her skin crawl. "More patient than most men would be, but you seem to have forgotten what you are. Let me remind you." What happened next was not new. It had happened before, too many times to count, since she'd turned 16 and caught his attention. But knowing it would happen didn't make it bearable. She left her body the way she'd learned to do, let her mind float up to the ceiling and watch from a distance while he did what he wanted with the shell she left behind. When it was over, she gathered her scattered herbs with mechanical precision, her face blank, her movements careful. He was already back at his desk, already writing in his account books, as if nothing had occurred, as if he hadn't just stolen another piece of her soul. "You can go," he said without looking up. "And Celia, next time I call for you, you come immediately. Understand?" "Yes, sir." She walked out of that house and across the yard, past Bess, who looked at her with helpless sympathy, past the other enslaved people who turned their eyes away because there was nothing they could do and looking hurt too much. She walked all the way to the creek that ran behind the quarters and knelt at its edge. Her reflection stared back at her from the water, a face she barely recognized, all the light gone from her eyes. She wanted to scream, but she'd learned young that screaming brought more pain. She wanted to cry, but tears were another luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she made a decision. She would leave. Not someday, not in some distant future, but soon, within the month, before winter locked the mountains in ice and made escape impossible. And before she left, Thomas Ashford would pay for every violation, every theft, every moment of powerlessness he'd forced upon her. The how of it came to her as she stared at her reflection, an idea as cold and clear as the creek water. She knew plants, which ones healed and which ones killed. She knew how to move unseen through the big house. She knew his habits, his weaknesses, the rhythm of his days. Most importantly, she knew she had nothing left to lose. The first person she told was old Esther. She waited 3 days, until the next gathering expedition took them up into the high country where no one could overhear. Esther moved slowly these days, her joints swollen with rheumatism, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She'd been born free, she'd told Celia once, in a place where black folks could live without fear. Then she'd been kidnapped as a child and sold south, and freedom became nothing but a memory. They were searching for wild ginseng, the root that sold for good money and grew deep in the forest where the old trees stood. The autumn sun filtered through leaves turned gold and crimson, and the air smelled of earth and decay and the promise of winter. "I'm leaving," Celia said quietly, digging carefully around a ginseng plant. Esther's hand stilled. "Chile. Before the first snow. I've been studying on it. I know the paths north. I know where to find food, shelter. I can do it. They'll come after you. You know they will. And when they catch you, they won't catch me." Celia's voice was hard. "I know these mountains better than any white man ever will. I can disappear up here." Esther was quiet for a long moment, her weathered face troubled. "What brought this on? I mean, I know things been hard, but—" "What changed?" Celia told her. "Not everything. Some violations were too deep to speak aloud, but enough." Esther listened with her eyes closed, her jaw tight. "Lord have mercy," she whispered when Celia finished. "That man got the devil in him." "The devil or just power," Celia said bitterly. "Maybe they're the same thing." "So you're gonna run. Just run, leave us all behind." The accusation stung, but Celia understood it. Every escape attempt that failed made things harder for everyone. Patrols increased. Privileges were revoked. Sometimes people were sold south as punishment for someone else's defiance. "I want you to come with me," Celia said, "and whoever else wants to chance it. I've been thinking, if we wait until after the tobacco harvest, when Master Ashford goes to town for the auction, we could get half a day's head start before anyone notices. Take the ridge trail east toward North Carolina, then circle north toward Kentucky. There's caves up there where we could shelter if we need to." "I'm too old for that kind of journey," Esther said sadly. "My legs wouldn't make it past the first ridge, but Marcus maybe, Samuel, some of the younger ones." Marcus was Celia's cousin, though they'd been raised more like siblings. He was strong, clever, and had been whipped 3 times last year for what Master Ashford called impudence, which meant looking him in the eye and speaking the truth. Samuel was quieter, but he'd tried to run once before. Made it all the way to the Kentucky border before the patrollers caught him and brought him back. "I'll talk to them," Celia said, careful like. "But Esther, there's something else." The old woman looked at her, waiting. "Before I go, I'm going to make sure Thomas Ashford never hurts anybody else the way he's hurt me." Esther's eyes widened. "Celia, no. That's murder you're talking about. You'll hang for it if they catch you, or worse." "Only if they catch me, and only if they can prove it wasn't natural causes." Celia pulled a plant from her basket, monkshood, with its purple flowers and deadly roots. "You taught me about this, told me to never use it in medicines because there's no antidote. No amount too small to be dangerous, remember? I taught you so you'd know to avoid it, not to—" His heart'll just stop. "They'll think it was his time. He drinks heavy, everyone knows it. A man his age, drinking like that. It ain't unusual for the heart to give out. And you'll be long gone before anyone thinks to question it." Esther's voice held a mixture of horror and reluctant admiration. "You've been planning this. Every detail, every step. I can't leave without knowing he'll never do to anyone else what he's done to me. And I can't take the chance he'll catch me and bring me back. Better to make sure there's nothing to come back to." They worked in silence for a while, their baskets filling with roots and leaves. Finally, Esther spoke. "Your mama would be proud of you. She had that same fire, that same refusal to bend. It's what got her sold away from her first family, brought her here. She never stopped fighting, not till the day she died." Celia's throat tightened. "Tell me about her, please. You never talk much about her." "She was beautiful, tall and straight-backed, with eyes that could see right through a person. She knew things, plant medicine, star reading, ways of knowing that white folks called witchcraft, but was really just wisdom passed down from her grandmother and her grandmother's grandmother, all the way back to Africa." Esther smiled at the memory. "She told me once that our people got power they can't take away, no matter how many chains they put on us. Power in our blood, our bones, our knowing. She said one day, all the chains would break, and our people would rise up and be free. You believe that?" "I got to believe it, or I might as well lay down and die right now." Yes, I believe it. Maybe not in my lifetime, but someday. And Celia? Esther gripped her hand. You go on and do what you got to do. But you survive, you hear me? You get north. You make a life. You live free. That's how you honor your mama. That's how you honor all of us still in chains. I will, Celia promised. I'll make it. And when I'm free, I'll find a way to send word. Maybe even find a way to help others get out. Then I'll pray for you every day. Pray for your feet to be swift and your path to be clear. They finished their gathering and headed back down the mountain. With each step, Celia felt her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. She had a plan. She had purpose. And soon she would have freedom. Over the next 2 weeks, Celia moved through her days with careful normalcy. But beneath the surface, she was preparing. She talked to Marcus first, catching him alone one evening when he returned from working the tobacco fields. They stood by the creek, speaking in voices that wouldn't carry. You lost your mind, was his first response when she outlined her plan. Maybe. Or maybe I finally found it. Celia, they'll kill you. What you're talking about, poisoning a white man, that's not just running, that's declaring war. He declared war on me a long time ago, she said fiercely. Every time he put his hands on me, every time he reminded me I was property, he was saying I ain't human. Well, I am human, Marcus, and I'm taking back what he stole. Marcus studied her face in the fading light. You're serious. As death. Then count me in, not for the other part, but for running. I've been ready to run for years, just been waiting for someone brave enough or crazy enough to try it again. Guess you're both. Over the following days, 3 others joined their plan. Samuel, who tried to escape before. Ruth, a young woman whose children had been sold away last spring. And Isaiah, a field hand with knowledge of the trails from his days hunting with his previous owner. They couldn't all leave together. Too conspicuous. But they could leave in pairs with hours between them and meet at a designated point in the mountains. Celia drew maps in the dirt and then smoothed them away. She shared her knowledge of the terrain, the hiding places, the route north. We leave on auction day, she told them. November 8th. Master Ashford will be gone from dawn till late evening, taking the tobacco to market. That's our window. What about provisions, Ruth asked. I'm gathering them bit by bit, drying meat, hoarding cornmeal, hiding things in the old smokehouse nobody uses anymore. We'll each carry what we can. And clothes? It's gonna be cold up there. We take what we got and layer everything. Once we're clear, we can steal from clotheslines if we need to. White folks hang their washing out without thinking twice about it. They planned obsessively, covering every detail they could think of. But Celia kept the other part of her plan to herself. The part that involved monkshood route and Master Ashford's evening whiskey. She'd been tending to him regularly now, playing the obedient servant, letting him think he'd broken her spirit. It was the hardest acting she'd ever done, forcing the body to comply while her mind counted down the days. But each visit gave her more information, more understanding of his routines. He drank 3 glasses of whiskey every evening, sitting in his study, going over his accounts. The bottle sat on his desk, and Celia often brought him a fresh glass when the old one emptied. It would be simple, almost too simple, to add a few drops of monkshood tincture to that 3rd glass. The dose would need to be precise. Too much, and it would be obvious. Too little, and he'd just get sick. But she'd been studying, experimenting with drops of the tincture on mice she caught, calculating the amount needed to stop a full-grown man's heart within hours. 3 days before the planned escape, she prepared the tincture. She did it alone, deep in the forest, using rainwater and alcohol she'd stolen from the medicine cabinet in the big house. The process was exacting, requiring patience and precision, qualities she'd learned from Esther, though the old woman would never have taught her this particular application. When it was done, she held the small bottle up to the light, clear as water, tasteless, odorless, deadly. "For Mama," she whispered. "For every woman he's violated, for every person he's owned, for my freedom." She tucked the bottle into the hidden pocket she'd sewn into her skirt. 2 days before the escape, Master Ashford called her to his study again. Her skin crawled as she entered, but she kept her face serene, docile. "Celia." He looked up from his papers with something almost like fondness. "You've been very compliant lately. I appreciate that. Shows you've accepted your situation, learned your place." "Yes, sir." "Good. I've been thinking about what I said before, about you moving into the house, having better accommodations. I decided to do it. After the auction, after I sell the tobacco, I'll have the small room upstairs prepared for you. You'll attend to me directly. Be my personal servant. It'll be much better for you, I promise." Celia felt bile rise in her throat, but forced herself to nod. "Thank you, sir. That's very kind. You'll see, things will be different, better." He reached out and touched her face, and it took every ounce of her will not to flinch away. "You're too beautiful to waste in the quarters, and smart too. I've always known you were smarter than the others. We could have a good arrangement, you and I." An arrangement. As if she had any choice. As if her consent mattered at all. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Pour me a drink, would you? It's been a long day." Her heart hammered as she crossed to the sideboard where he kept his whiskey. This was it. 2 days early, but perhaps that was better. More time for the poison to work, less immediate connection to her disappearance. Her hands shook slightly as she poured the amber liquid into a crystal glass. Then, checking to make sure his attention was on his papers, she withdrew the small bottle from her pocket and added exactly 3 drops. 1, 2, 3. She stirred it with her finger, then brought the glass to him. "Here you are, sir." He took it without looking up. "Thank you, Celia. You can go now. I'll see you tomorrow." She walked out of that study with her head high, her heart racing. She'd done it. Whatever happened now, she'd struck back. She'd taken some small measure of revenge for years of abuse. That night, she barely slept. She kept expecting to hear shouting, to be dragged from her pallet and accused. But the night remained quiet, except for the usual sounds. Snoring, babies crying, the wind in the eaves. The next morning, the plantation woke to chaos. Master Ashford was found dead in his study, slumped over his desk, his skin cold and grey. The doctor was summoned from town, and he examined the body while the enslaved people waited anxiously, knowing that death in the big house always meant trouble for them. Heart failure, the doctor pronounced finally. Not uncommon in men who drink as heavily as Mr. Ashford did, the whiskey weakens the heart over time. Tragic, but natural causes. Celia stood with the others, her face appropriately sorrowful, while inside she burned with fierce, terrible joy. She'd done it. She'd killed her rapist, her owner, the man who'd stolen years of her life, and no one suspected a thing. But there was no time to celebrate. With Master Ashford dead, everything would change. His brother would inherit the property, and his brother was known to be a hard man, quick to sell enslaved people to cotton plantations down south. They needed to move up their timeline. "Tonight," she whispered to Marcus when they had a moment alone. "We leave tonight. Pass the word." He nodded, his eyes wide. "You think his dying and us running the same day will look suspicious. Can't be helped. His brother will be here by tomorrow, probably with an overseer. This is our only chance." That day crept by with agonizing slowness. Celia went through the motions of mourning, of serving the white people who came to pay their respects, of listening to them talk about the deceased as if he'd been a good man, a fair master, a pillar of the community. If they only knew. As evening fell and the household finally settled, Celia gathered her meager supplies. The food she'd hidden, extra clothes, a knife stolen from the kitchen, the maps she'd memorized and destroyed. She took one last look at the quarters where she'd spent her entire life, at the people still sleeping who would wake to find 5 of their number gone. She hoped they'd understand. She hoped they'd be glad. Then she slipped out into the darkness where Marcus, Samuel, Ruth, and Isaiah waited. Together, they began climbing toward the ridge, toward the mountains, toward the north and freedom. Behind them, Thomas Ashford lay in his coffin, and Celia felt no regret, only the fierce, burning determination to survive, to make it north, to live free. The mountains rose dark against the star-filled sky, and somewhere up there, the path to freedom waited. They started climbing. The autumn moon hung low and fat over the ridgeline, casting silver shadows through the forest as Celia and her companions climbed. They moved in single file, silent except for the crunch of leaves underfoot and the ragged sound of breathing. Isaiah led, his hunter's eyes able to read the trail even in darkness. Behind him came Samuel, then Ruth, then Marcus, with Celia bringing up the rear. They'd been walking for 3 hours, and already Ruth was struggling. She was strong. You didn't survive slavery without strength. But she was small, and the steep mountain trail was punishing. "Wait," Celia whispered, and the line stopped. She moved up to where Ruth stood bent over, hands on her knees. "Here, drink this." She pulled out a canteen of water mixed with honey and ginger, something to give energy without weighing down the stomach. Ruth drank gratefully. "I'm sorry," Ruth gasped. "I'm slowing everyone down." "You're fine," Marcus said firmly. "We got time. They won't even know we're gone until morning, and they won't start looking until they've asked around local farms. That buys us most of tomorrow." "Master Ashford's brother might push harder, though," Samuel pointed out. "Finding his brother dead and 5 slaves missing the same day, he'll think we had something to do with it." Celia's stomach clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "They can think what they want. The doctor said it was natural causes. They got no proof of anything else. Unless someone talks," Isaiah said quietly. They all fell silent. Everyone left behind knew about the escape plan. You couldn't keep that kind of secret from people who'd spent their whole lives learning to read unspoken communication. Old Esther knew. Bess knew. Others suspected, even if they didn't have details. "Nobody's gonna talk," Marcus said, with more confidence than Celia felt. "They know what happens to people who help runaways. Better to play dumb, act surprised. We need to keep moving, Celia said. Another 2 hours and we'll reach the cave where we planned to rest. We can stay there during daylight, then keep going tomorrow night. They pressed on. The trail grew steeper, rockier, the trees pressing close on either side. Celia's legs burned and her breath came hard. But she welcomed the pain. Pain meant she was alive, meant she was free, meant every step took her farther from the plantation and the man who'd tormented her. Dead man now. She'd killed him, taken a life. She waited for guilt to come, for remorse, for some moral reckoning. Instead, she felt only a cold satisfaction and an overwhelming desire to survive. Around midnight, they reached the cave, really just an overhang of rock deep in the forest, invisible unless you knew where to look. Celia had discovered it years ago while gathering herbs. It was dry, sheltered from wind and rain, and large enough for all 5 of them to fit comfortably. "We'll rest here until tomorrow evening," she said, as they settled in. "No fire. Can't risk the smoke being seen. But we got food and water, and we're safe for now." They ate dried meat and cornbread in silence, too exhausted for conversation. Then, one by one, they arranged themselves on the cave floor and tried to sleep. Celia lay awake long after the others' breathing had deepened into sleep. Her mind raced through everything that could go wrong. Dogs. They'd likely used dogs, bloodhounds that could track a scent for miles. She'd prepared for that, had stolen a jar of black pepper to throw on their trail, had planned a route that crossed multiple streams. But would it be enough? And what about patrollers? Every county had them, armed white men who roamed the roads looking for runaways. Some did it for the reward money. Others did it for sport, for the pleasure of hunting human beings. She thought of the stories she'd heard. Runaways caught and returned, then whipped until the flesh fell from their backs. Runaways sold south to Mississippi or Alabama, to cotton plantations where the work was killing and the overseers had no mercy. Runaways hanged as examples. But she also thought of the other stories, the ones whispered late at night, tales of people who'd made it north, who'd found freedom in places called Ohio and Canada. Stories of a network of helpers, both black and white, who hid runaways in barns and basements and root cellars, who provided food and directions and hope. The Underground Railroad. That's what they called it, though there were no trains and no tracks, just brave people willing to risk everything to help others find freedom. Celia pulled out the scrap of paper old Esther had given her the day before they left. It had been folded so many times it was soft as cloth. On it, in careful handwriting, was a single word: Oaksford. "There's a town called Oaksford in Kentucky, maybe 50 miles north of here," Esther had whispered. "Ask for the blacksmith. Tell him Esther sent you, that you're following the drinking gourd. He'll help." The drinking gourd, that's what they called the Big Dipper, the constellation that pointed north toward the North Star. "Follow the drinking gourd," the old song said, "and you'll find your way to freedom." Celia closed her eyes and tried to picture it, a life in the north. Could she even imagine it? A life where she owned herself, where no one could touch her without permission, where she could walk down a street without stepping aside for white people, where she could. Can't sleep either, she startled. Marcus had sat up, his face barely visible in the darkness. "Too much thinking," she admitted. "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. You know they're gonna come after us hard. Ashford's brother. I heard he's mean. Meaner than Thomas even. I know. And they might suspect, about the poison. Celia's breath caught. What do you mean? Come on, Celia. I know you. I seen how you've been studying plants, asking Esther questions. I seen that look in your eyes lately. And then Master Ashford dies the same night we run. Marcus shook his head. I ain't saying nothing, and I ain't judging. Lord knows if anyone deserved killing, it was him. But if they figure it out, they won't. Doctor said it was natural causes. Yeah, but his brother might not accept that. Might push for an autopsy, a real investigation. And if they find poison in his body, they'll know one of us did it. They'll hunt us down like dogs. Fear gripped Celia's chest, but she forced it down. Then we better make sure they don't catch us. We got a good lead. We know these mountains. We can do this, Marcus. He reached out and squeezed her hand. I believe you. And whatever happens, I'm glad we tried. Rather die free than live as a slave one more day. We're not gonna die. We're gonna live. We're gonna make it north and build real lives. We're gonna... A sound from outside the cave froze them both. Footsteps, human footsteps, moving through the leaves. Everyone woke instantly, silently. Isaiah had his knife out. Samuel pressed himself against the cave wall. Ruth's eyes were huge with terror. The footsteps came closer, then stopped. I know you're in there, a voice called softly, a woman's voice. Don't be scared, I'm here to help. Celia's mind raced. A trap? But how would anyone know where they were? They'd been so careful. Who are you? She called back, keeping her own voice low. My name's Hannah. Esther sent word to me yesterday about some travelers who might be coming through. I've been watching for you. Esther. Could this be real? Could they already have found their first station on the Underground Railroad? How do I know you're telling the truth? Celia asked. Esther said to tell you your mama's name was Grace, that she had healing hands and she passed them down to you. That good enough? Only Esther knew that. Celia felt tears prick her eyes. The old woman had protected them, had set this up without even telling her. Come out slow, the woman said, but hurry. You ain't safe here. Patrol's been doubled since Ashford died. His brother's offering a big reward, $50 a head. Every white man in 3 counties is going to be looking for you. They emerged from the cave to find a small, wiry black woman of about 40, dressed in men's clothes, with a rifle slung over her shoulder. Name's Hannah, she repeated. I'm what they call a conductor. I help people get north. You're my cargo. She looked them over, quickly assessing. You all able to move? We got about 6 miles to cover before daylight. We can move, Celia said. Good. Follow me and for God's sake be quiet. These mountains got eyes and ears everywhere.